It's the unique blend of culture, people, and the way of life. I think that's what makes this place what it is, and I'm so incredibly lucky to be able to experience it every day. I do not take it for granted. Hi, my name is Jessica Sarkodie. I'm a creative and storyteller originally from Ghana, and I'm currently based in Lisbon. I'm the latest guest on Portugal The Simple Life podcast. I talked to Dylan about how I came to live in Portugal, and why I love it so much. I hope you enjoy.
Welcome back, or welcome to another episode of Portugal The Simple Life, and I'm delighted to be joined here by Jessica Sarkodie. Jessica, bon dia, good morning. Thank you for being on the podcast. How are you?
Bon dia. I'm doing super well. How are you?
Very well. Very, very well. Thank you. Jessica, why don't you start off telling us a little bit about you?
Okay, so my name is Jessica Sarkodie. I'm originally from Ghana. I've lived in a few different places though before, finally landing in Portugal. I'm 30 years old and I'm a creative and storyteller. Work-wise, I specialize in crafting like compelling narratives and visuals through creative direction and also digital marketing. I do a lot of social media management and strategy development to really help brands connect deeply with their audience. Unrelated to work, I really love great design, understated design. I love spending time in nature. So the Portuguese countryside has a very special place in my heart. And I'm quite the old soul. I think I prefer almost everything old school to today's version, like from music to fashion to mannerisms. And I'm currently based in Lisbon.
Awesome. How did Portugal start for you? How did you discover it? How did that all begin?
So I first visited Portugal in 2019, the summer of 2019, but it had been on my radar
Will be just before COVID.
Exactly, just
Yeah.
before COVID. But it had been on my radar before. So when I was in university, we're talking about 10 years ago, I did a study abroad in Paris and I lived with a host family. That was a wonderful family. And my host family at the time, they were spending a lot of time in Portugal. My host mom would tell me that this is a really great place to visit. It wasn't really on my radar. Then I was like, I don't know anyone who goes to Portugal for holidays. But she sort of planted that seed. And then, fast forward a few years later, there's a New York-based photographer whose work I really admire. She visited Portugal, did some work here, and the images I saw just completely sold me. It was sort of like the icing on the cake. So within a year, I found myself on sort of my first Portuguese adventure. I did Porto, Marvão, Estremoz, Lisbon, and a little bit of Lisbon area. So like Sintra, Cascais. And it was just so magical, like that first trip. It was probably the first time, outside of my home country. I've seen a few places, I've lived in a few different countries. And it was the first time that I had the feeling of like, wow, I could see myself living here.
Just take us through, Jessica, then, going from, okay, I've visited this place for a holiday, kind of done this like quick trip through the country to now moving, and how that experience has been.
I really am not sure that I visited, I really liked it, but I'm not sure that I chose Portugal as much as Portugal chose me. So I'm from Ghana and I have a Ghanaian passport, and you're from South Africa, so you probably know what this means from a logistic and practical viewpoint.
Yes.
Given where I'm from, I don't really, or rather the passport I carry, I don't really have the luxury of picking a country and being able to move there. I visited, I really liked it, but I'm also very aware that I need a visa to go anywhere, even if it's just for 24 hours.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, Western countries are not the most generous when it comes to giving visas to people from the global South. We're unfortunately frequently met with like suspicion and a lot of barriers. Yeah, I was like, I really enjoyed this trip. It would be a dream to be able to live here one day, but I just kind of forgot about it. I was like, this would be a nice, but I didn't think about it. And then it was a few years later, I want to say it was end of 2021, early 2022, that a close friend who I had shared, photos from my Portugal trip, and she knew I really liked it. She saw this article and shared it with me that was basically a new visa that had become available that I could apply for. Like I almost perfectly met the, the requirements.
Okay.
Uh, that's how, like, summer of 2022, I sort of decided to give it a shot. But again, all of this, the way this panned out, it was very sort of random, and
Mm,
I would say I was quite lucky because I had also made certain decisions months and a few years before that allowed me to meet the visa requirements
okay. Without
uh,
knowing.
without knowing
Without knowing.
exactly. It was just very lucky. And frankly, shortly after I applied, the embassy equivalent in Ghana, because we don't have a Portuguese embassy, there's just like an office, and you take your documents and then they send your documents to Nigeria because
Okay.
that's what the embassy is in the region. The embassy equivalent in Ghana stopped taking applications not long
Oh
after
my
I applied.
goodness.
So again, very lucky circumstances. It was not I didn't wake up one day and like pick Portugal and say, okay, I'm gonna work towards it, because it just was not a possibility,
Yeah,
really. Yeah, the timing was right and it worked out, thankfully.
amazing. You mentioned that earlier in our conversation that your heart is in the Portuguese countryside.
I think as I've gotten older, my appreciation for simple things has increased significantly. And I just find that the Portuguese countryside, I mean, I live in Lisbon, but I'm always so at peace when I'm in the countryside. I think, the produce is better, the air is better, the people are even more open and warm. I think there's just something about the natural beauty of it. And yeah, I just really enjoy the peace and the quality of everything in the
Yeah.
countryside. When
You said that you've met people and you've been able to interact. How has that experience been for you?
so in Lisbon, I've just found that, I mean, Portuguese people, as well as people who are not Portuguese that live here, I don't know, maybe it's something in the water, are significantly more open than anywhere else I've lived.
Hmm. Okay.
Um, and are just more ready and available to help people without necessarily expecting anything back. So that's what I found in Lisbon. Honestly, same thing in the countryside, or in smaller towns when I visited. The thing I like about the countryside or just being outside of Lisbon is that people are less likely to speak English, which is good for me wanting to practice my Portuguese.
Looking for a home in Portugal? This break in Portugal, the Simple Life podcast, is brought to you by Dylan and his team of certified realtors at Portugal Realty. Portugal Realty offers the exclusive Simple Life home buyer program. Visit portugalrealty.com today and book your free call to find out more. Welcome to the Simple Life.
So I live in a pretty small building, and there's only 4 units in total in the building. And the neighbor who's closest to me, he's an older Portuguese man, probably in his 70s, does not speak any English
Mm.
or French. And so we don't, especially when I first moved in, we didn't have many ways to speak to each other. But I remember in those first couple of weeks, I was furnishing my apartment. And so I would have a lot of things delivered, but I had just moved. And so I also had to do a lot of housekeeping. And so I was constantly out of the apartment. And I cannot tell you the number of times I could not speak to this guy because I didn't speak any Portuguese then, but I cannot tell you the number of times where I've had stuff delivered that needed a signature, and he would just take it for me and then drop it at my door. I hadn't asked him to. I didn't know how. But he could just see that I had moved in, I lived alone, and I could probably use a little bit of help, and offered it without me even having to ask. And so it's the little things like this that really make living here so special.
What advice would you give to people, Jessica, who are looking to do the same thing that you've done, for people in different walks of life who want to come here, not just kind of sit in that expat bubble and, like you said, not understand what's behind the story and behind that story? What advice would you give to people that want to come here, want to integrate, want to learn, want to communicate and build relationships with local people? What advice would you give?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing really is, and this is advice for me too, is learning the language. I think
Mm,
that makes a huge difference.
Mhm.
Amongst my friends, those who speak Portuguese close to fluently definitely have a wider Portuguese community than
Mhm.
those who don't. So I would say that's definitely top of the list, learn the language. Of course, once you're here, you also need to make the effort. I don't have a ton of Portuguese friends, but the ones I do are incredibly reliable.
Yeah.
Um, but it's very much a two-way street. And so you really
Yeah.
sort of need to reach out to people. You need to be proactive in building relationships because for the most part, a Portuguese person here, like they already have their family, they already have their friends. They don't really need you. you know, you have to be pretty proactive in sort of like initiating things
Yeah.
to build the relationship and go out of the little, expat bubbles. I do this thing sometimes where, if I have a little time on my hands, I will take the metro to a stop that I haven't been to before, or get off at a stop that I don't really know, stop at a cafe that I've never been to, just to explore places that I probably wouldn't have gone to or don't necessarily maybe need to go to. But I've met people doing that. I've become friends with people from these things, but I've also seen more of, particularly Lisbon, because this is where I live. But I've also seen more of the city from doing that. It's very easy
Mm.
to move here as a foreigner, live in a certain neighborhood with lots of
Yeah.
foreigners, and sort of just hang out there and
Yeah.
do the cafes and the restaurants in that little,
Branches.
yeah. But I think it's important, especially if you want to be here long term, to explore beyond just,
Yeah.
the comfort of your little neighborhood.
Jessica, what is one thing that you would like people to remember and take away from our conversation?
Given the context of my story and my journey, and just how unlikely it was that someone like me, given where I'm from, would be able to move here under the circumstances, I think the biggest thing I'd like to share, and it's I would say probably the biggest thing living in Portugal has taught me, is that our backgrounds don't have to define our future, and
Mm.
our destiny is just like not predetermined. We have some power to create the life we want. So I guess for anyone who's listening, who wants to live in a certain place, wants to make a certain change in their life, it's so possible. And sometimes you can't really figure out the how or plan all the steps. Like in my case, visiting Portugal, loved it, but I was like, at the time there was no way for me to
Mm.
move here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I took steps towards my second best bet, which was moving to Senegal at the time. But the doors sort of magically opened without me having to do anything. But I was ready when it did to be able to, take the opportunity. So yeah, a lot more things are possible than sometimes we think.
Jessica, finally, a question that we ask all of our guests. Portugal, the simple life. Why?
It's the unique blend of culture, people, and the way of life. I think that's what makes this place what it is. And I'm so incredibly lucky to be able to experience it every day. I do not take it for granted.
Thank you. I love that. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you. This was lovely. Thank you for having me.
And this is the part where you say that's a wrap. I'm going to let you call it.
That's a wrap.
So thank you once again to our guests, and thank you to all of you for listening. Please subscribe, share with your friends, give us a thumbs up, and please leave a comment or a review. We always love to hear from you. Don't forget, Portugal The Simple Life also has a magazine, so download it. It's for free. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode, and as we say in Portugal, sejas bem-vindo. Welcome to The Simple Life.